November 9th, 2014 was perhaps the biggest date in Geometry Dash history, as along with the many other features a 1.9 update had brought to the table, the most important change in the game's history was made upon its release. Geometry Dash was ported to Steam for PC players to officially play the game on better hardware, leading to a complete revolution of this game's skill ceiling. Prior to this point, Geometry Dash was solely available on mobile devices, being offered on the Google Play Store and Apple App Store. In the first 9 major updates to the game, the history of the hardest mobile demon and the hardest demon were one and the same. Sure, some players chose to play on options such as BlueStacks or other emulators, but the vast majority of players up to this point were on mobile devices. This turning point in the game's history marked the rise of highly skilled and competitive players who would reach new heights of demon slaying, with levels such as Cataclysm and Bloodbath all the way up to Slaughterhouse and Sakupan Circles being beaten by top players. Not as many people today focus on the community of top players who still use mobile devices to challenge themselves and beat the hardest demons they can with their disadvantage in hardware. With that in mind, this is the history of the hardest mobile demon. This history will start at the beginning of 1.9, as that is when the divide between mobile and PC players really began. The hardest demon at the time was either the old version of Creeper Force by Creepermilk, verified on mobile by its creator, or Doomsday 2 by Neptune, beaten on mobile by Sumsar. PC players soon after began beating harder demons, such as Riot beating Deadly Clubstep in December of 2014, which took another 7 months to get its first mobile victor, but nobody was prepared for how far PC players would take it. On May 14th of 2015, Garan David would become the second PC player to beat a new top 1 demon, beating Cataclysm by G-Boy. This level would not be beaten on mobile for an extremely long time, so this is where the mobile player's history starts to diverge from the hardest demon in the game. On July 18th, 2015, the mobile player Pakoski18 became the first mobile victor of Deadly Clubstep by Neptune, 7 months after Riot became its first PC victor. After several fails at the ending and over 3,000 attempts, a new hardest mobile demon finally arrived. Later, on September 18th, 2015, Disc Joker became the first mobile victor of Acropolis, with over 4,500 attempts and several fails at the last wave. This crazy achievement earned him shoutouts from popular PC players at the time, such as Powerbomb, who called him a rising star in GD. Nearly 2 months after beating Acropolis, Disc Joker would one-up his own accomplishment by beating a new hardest demon and a new hardest mobile demon. On October 11th, 2015, Disc Joker became the first victor of Sparklick Ocean by Koryaquer, another insane demon which had recently been released. Despite being a new hardest, they beat this level quicker than Acropolis in only 3,000 attempts. Soon after though, a new player would come and beat the new hardest mobile demon. It isn't often that video games have stories of unknown players coming out of nowhere and already being the best players in their field, but this is one of those stories. In early November 2015, Geometry Josh created his channel and uploaded Acropolis by Zobros, sequenced by Woogie1411, and Necropolis by Neptune, which was his hardest demon and the hardest demon beaten on mobile at the time. What people didn't know before, however, is that all 3 of these completions were from before they were uploaded. Geometry Josh was not only the first victor of Necropolis, but Acropolis and Sequence as well, beating both Necropolis and Acropolis back in July and Sequence back in September. This makes Geometry Josh's Necropolis completion the actual hardest mobile demon ever since Deadly Clubstep was beaten by Pakoski18. Another interesting upload at the time was his progress on Cataclysm by G-Boy, getting 69% in nearly 15,000 attempts back in August. This level wouldn't get its first mobile victor until over 8 months later by the player Renato16. If Geometry Josh had finished the level back in August, this would have been the hardest for nearly a year, with nobody else's mobile accomplishments coming even close. While he had not held the title of the hardest mobile demon for over 4 months, Pakoski18 was working on something even more difficult. On November 21st, 2015, Pakoski beat Crimson Clutter by Red Universe. At the time considered the hardest 9 circles level, it became the new hardest mobile demon as well. This completion took them nearly 8,500 attempts, making it their new hardest demon by far. Crimson Clutter, Sequence, and Necropolis were all considered extreme demons by their mobile victors, as they're much more difficult on low refresh rates and with the input delay and low resolution that mobile provides, but all of these were still only considered insane demons by the standards of PC players. Things would change a month later when a mobile player would rise up and beat the first ever mobile extreme demon. This level was undoubtedly one of the hardest levels in the game, only being contested by the likes of Cataclysm and Ice Carbon Diablo X, eventually revealed to be hack verified as well as its first victor being outed as another hacker. This level only received a single PC victor, Sandstorm, before eventually being beaten on mobile as the hardest mobile demon by far. The player Disc Joker wasn't satisfied with just beating insane demons, and after a 96% fail, the worst fail on the level so far, and exactly 22,000 attempts, it finally happened. On New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2015, Disc Joker beat the ultimate phase by Andromeda, and a new era of mobile players had begun. Before this point, mobile players had been competing to bring the hardest mobile demon up higher and higher alongside the rising standards of PC players. Disc Joker proved that mobile players back then could still compete with the hardest demons at the time, being the second victor of an extreme demon. Due to these active competing players, the hardest demon usually only lasted around a month. Disc Joker's The Ultimate Phase completion, however, stayed as the hardest mobile accomplishment for much longer though. 1 month passed, 2 months passed, 2 entire years passed before the next hardest mobile demon would finally be achieved. Fast forwarding from 2015 all the way to December 2017, Mini Wheat Duo had created a fan-made demon list ranking the hardest mobile demons in the game 2 months ago, which sparked new interest in beating extreme and insane demons on mobile again. By this point, the 144Hz revolution had already occurred, and PC players were so dominant that it was necessary to create a new list to rank levels by mobile players' opinions as well, due to being a completely separate community. On December 11th, 2017, the player Machine 17 became the first mobile victor of Niflheim by Vismuth, an extreme demon that was ranked highly on the demon list at the time. It took them over 22,000 attempts to beat this extreme demon, taking longer than Disc Joker took to beat the ultimate phase. This would be the first time someone had beaten a level harder than the ultimate phase, knocking it out of the first place spot nearly 2 years after it was first beaten. The next top 1 mobile demon surprisingly came not even 3 weeks later. On December 27th, 2017, the player Stiletto became the first mobile victor of the extreme demon Twisted Tranquility by Flugster. This level was within the top 50 hardest extreme demons at the time, including PC player beaten levels, which made it an extremely impressive achievement. Stiletto would later go on to beat both Niflheim and the ultimate phase in the next few months, proving their ability to consistently beat the hardest mobile demons incredibly quickly. The next level to become the hardest mobile demon would be beaten nearly a month later in 2018. On January 19th, the player Hylo would become the first mobile victor of Novalis by Grylex after a 95% fail and nearly 14,000 attempts.
Oh yeah, man. I did it. I fucking did it, boy. I fucking did it. Oh yeah, man.
This was initially placed at number 2 on the mobile demon list, but was raised to the number 1 position a month later, narrowly becoming the top 1 before an even more difficult level was beaten only 10 days later. On February 18th, 2018, the player Venfi beat Plasma Pulse 3 by Smokes. A top 40 extreme demon at the time, it took nearly 21,000 attempts to get its first mobile victor.
Yes! Yes!
Not to be outdone by the new top 1s, Stiletto would beat another new hardest mobile demon next. On March 7th of 2018, Stiletto became the first mobile victor of Audio Extraction by Good Smile. He had already beaten this level on mobile earlier without recording it, but eventually re-beat it for proof to place it on the mobile demon list, where it was quickly added at number 1. This level would stand at the top of the list for nearly 3 months before being moved down below Plasma Pulse 3, which is now considered the harder of the 2 levels. Plasma Pulse 3, having already been top 1 before this, surprisingly stayed at number 1 for even longer than Audio Extraction, taking nearly 5 months for something else to challenge its position as the hardest mobile demon. On November 4th, 2018, the player Hylo would do something absolutely crazy. He wouldn't beat another top 50 demon, not another top 40 demon, but would go beyond all expectations for mobile players at the time. Hilo would become the first person since Disc Joker back in 2015 to challenge what people thought to be possible on a mobile device, beating a top 10 demon at the time. Hilo became the first mobile victor of Celestial Force by Mindcap, a level that was placed at number 10 on the demon list. Taking over 50,000 attempts and 3 months of progressing with many fails including 88%, this achievement was well deserved. The completion was immediately placed at number 1 on the mobile demon list and stayed there for a long time, not to be topped until nearly 9 months later. Up until this point, extreme barriers had been broken left and right in the mobile community, with some even competing with the likes of the hardest PC beaten demons at the time. However, there was one final frontier of difficulty that had yet to be beaten on mobile. The most popular extreme demon in the game's history, and the level that started the 144Hz revolution, once considered completely impossible on mobile due to the skill set required, still had not a single victor on mobile. It was easy to see why, as precise timings were one thing, but an onslaught of straight fly and shift skill was unheard of for mobile players to actually make progress on, let alone beat. Bloodbath by Riot was an icon of the high FPS player base, and it had always seemed like a mobile victor was a long way away. Eventually though, on July 27, 2019, the player ThunderBT did the nearly impossible. ThunderBT became the first mobile victor of Bloodbath, with only 37,000 attempts spread throughout the years of playing the level.
There it is. It has been done. It's finally over. New number 1 demon on mobile.
Despite being far lower than Celestial Force on the 144Hz based demon list, the different skill set Bloodbath required made it far harder to beat on mobile than even Celestial Force, and was promptly placed at number 1 on the mobile demon list. With this barrier broken, now there was truly nothing mobile players couldn't do if they set their minds to it. All of the next hardest demons of the mobile list only get more and more impressive from here. That being said, it took a very long time for Bloodbath to be topped on the mobile demon list. Such an intimidating achievement made it difficult to even imagine something harder being beaten, and it didn't lose its number 1 position for over 1 year. However, that doesn't mean nothing harder has been beaten on a mobile device within that year. Now would be a good time to talk about a rule the mobile demon list has about 120Hz mobile devices. Demons beaten on 120Hz mobile will have their records accepted only after someone's beat the same level on 60Hz mobile, so that the list doesn't have any inconsistent opinions, as 120Hz mobile is such a large advantage compared to 60Hz mobile. This hasn't had any effect on the hardest mobile demons so far, as the vast majority of mobile players use 60Hz devices. The first time this rule affected a top 1 mobile demon placement was 8 months after ThunderBT's Bloodbath completion, when the 120Hz mobile player Zentel became the first mobile victor of Cowredder by Gablor. This would have been the new hardest mobile completion at the time, considered harder than even Bloodbath, but due to being beaten on 120Hz mobile, could not be added until another 60Hz player, Biprex, beat the level a year and a half later. It was added above Bloodbath, however by that point it was not top 1 anymore, as several more levels were beaten on 60Hz mobile that were harder than it. The first of these levels was Sunset Sandstorm by Crone44, which was beaten on mobile by Braden Bowl on August 26th of 2020. This took Braden Bowl 65,000 attempts and multiple fails at the ending, including 94%, a much deserved completion to be the first level to knock Bloodbath off its throne as the hardest mobile demon.
I just did it! Yes!
August 24th,
yes.
11 o'clock on the
Oh
Eastern Daylight Time.
Oh my god! Oh my gosh!
Sunset Sandstorm was a shock to the mobile community, and it stood for over 4 months before its number 1 position was contested. On December 30th, 2020, Koopa Super became the first mobile victor of Artificial Ascent by Viprin, a feat that was considered even harder than Sunset Sandstorm at the time. 2 months later, however, it was decided that Sunset Sandstorm was ultimately harder than Artificial Ascent on mobile, and the two were swapped, making Braden Bowl's completion stand on top for another 2 months. Finally, something definitively harder than Sunset Sandstorm was beaten on April 26, 2021, when the player pigchefer became the first mobile victor of XO by Kamal. The sheer dedication required for this completion becomes visible when you notice the attempt count this took to be beaten, with pigchefer spending nearly 125,000 attempts on XO before completing it. This attempt count is double the highest seen so far in this video, showing how difficult the achievement truly is. 4 months later, on August 17th, 2021, Biprex became the first mobile victor of Aronia, becoming the next hardest level on the mobile demon list, as it was placed at number 1. Despite this placement, it wasn't actually the hardest demon beaten on mobile at the time, as yet another case of a harder level being beaten on 120Hz mobile had happened 3 months earlier. This time, the level beaten was the biggest shock since Bloodbath was beaten, as yet another iconic extreme demon that was once thought impossible to be beaten on a mobile device was slain.
Okay, I bet Sonic Wave. I bet Sonic Wave, and yes.
On May 20th, 2021, the 120Hz mobile player Dashi became the first mobile victor of Sonic Wave by Cycling, an absolutely insane accomplishment that cannot be understated. With only 25,000 attempts, a lower attempt count than many high refresh rate PC players, Dashi truly made Geometry Dash history. Sadly, the level followed the same rules as Kawaretta, being unable to be added to the mobile demon list until it was beaten on 60Hz mobile. This took another 6 months to finally happen, being beaten by a 60Hz mobile player on December 17th, 2021, again by Biprex. This completion actually marked Biprex becoming the first mobile player to ever have completed the entire top 5 on the mobile demon list, a truly amazing feat of skill. However, with that being said, the high refresh rate mobile players have been active during those 6 months too. With the mobile demon list not allowing high refresh rate verifications, Dashi and Surplex created their own demon list to rank the high refresh rate mobile demons. In September of 2021, the list was finished and advertised under a video that was a fitting introduction, announcing the description of a new top 1 demon's completion. On September 28th, 2021, Dashi beat Arctic Lights on 120Hz mobile, becoming its first mobile victor, and the first mobile demon considered harder than Sonic Wave.
I fluked!
Less than 2 months later, the list would receive another new top 1 demon. This completion, however, felt just as shocking as when Hylo had beaten Celestial Force as a top 10 demon, as it still remains in the top 20 hardest demons to this day.
Yes! Oh my god! Yes!
On November 12th, 2021, 5 days before Biprex beat Sonic Wave, Zentel became the first and only player to have completed Crimson Planet by True Omega on a mobile device, an incredible achievement that will go down in this game's history. This completion took over 82,000 attempts even with a 120Hz mobile device, which is more proof of the dedication of these top mobile players. With 2022 now underway, the dedication of mobile players to prove themselves to the wider community continues strong. Sonic Wave and Crimson Planet sitting at the top of their respective lists to this day shows as an amazing achievement to the players who brought them there. Soon enough, new mobile achievements will be completed to continue this story, but for now, that is where the history stands.